Hey, previously I spoke about Stoner Witch being the bass player for the Melvins during the wistful and nostalgic days of grunge in the 1990s. And one of the other records that I played on that I've had tumultuous demand to talk about is this record right here, Stag. So get ready because I am going to start breaking this thing down. This is number 4 of 200 of copies of, I think this is the Third Man reissue of Stag. Tom Hazelmeyer of Amphetamine Reptile did kind of a co-release with Third Man, I think, and he was kind enough to send me a copy of each one of these, otherwise I would not actually own these records. So I haven't actually listened to the vinyl of this, but I have listened to the Japanese import of Stag, which I have, which has a couple of extra songs on it. And so I'm going to start to talk about that right now. So Stag is a record that's kind of transitional and interesting because it's the end of the Atlantic thing, and also the person who was instrumental in signing the Melvins to Atlantic, Danny Goldberg, he had decided to leave the company and go someplace else. So he was kind of the main booster of the band, and he was the president. He decided to leave the company, and so the guy who came in made no bones about it and said he hated the band to a variety of people who worked at the label, and also basically the band itself, and that he wasn't going to do anything to assist in a certain trajectory for the band. So there was a subsidiary company called Mammoth, I think, Matador maybe? I don't know. I don't know what the name of it was. And so Melvins got sent over there, and possibly there was a reduced budget for recording. Anyway, instead of being in one studio, we ended up being in 2 or 3 or 4 different studios, and there was a little bit of a chaotic feel to that particular element of what was happening. But nevertheless, I think it hangs together as a pretty good record. But I'm going to talk about the first song, which is called The Bit. And this is a great tune. I think Dale came up with the main sort of guitar thing, and then we all came up with our own parts. I love the bass part I came up with on this. I'll make no bones about it. It's gigantic sounding and has a really cool thing going on in it, particularly in the bridge part where I'm using a guitar pick to kind of scrape away at the bass strings, and so that makes it so when the other parts come in, they sound much bigger because of that part sounding thinner. So this has also me playing the guitar solo on it, I believe. I'm playing it with a 63 Strat through the Roger Mayer Voodoo box, which is a reproduction of the Univibe box he made for Hendrix. And it's got such a great groove to it. I always thought that this song should have been the single because it's really powerful and it's got this really nice hooky chorus to it that everybody can sing along to. For some reason, I don't know why it wasn't made the single, but I think Barracks was made the single, which was fairly confusing to me because that seemed like one of the least accessible songs. But anyway, this is a really cool song with a lot of great effects on it. I think at the very end of the song, the noise that you hear is just the guitar amp noise coming through the Roger Mayer Voodoo box. And there's wobulator all over this too, that love tone box that I talked about in a different video. So this is a really cool way to start the record. Next tune is a tune called Hide, and this is an instrumental thing that Buzz came up with on a 4-track. Buzz had the suggestion that all of us should come up with something completely independently, and we'll just put that on the record no matter what it was. So that was an interesting kind of aleatoric exercise. There wasn't any discussion as to how long anything should be, or what the subject matter should be, or the format, or even the type of music or whatever. But Buzz came up with this kind of cool little guitar instrumental thing, I think that's on a 4-track, and it sounds very Eno-esque to me. It reminds me of, the melodies remind me of early Eno, kind of before and after Science and Another Green World, and it has a really sort of an interesting, spooky, pastoral feel to it, and I always liked it. I think it's really cool. Regarding Eno, I remember going to one of the very first meetings at Atlantic with Buzz and Dale, and I think it was actually doing sound for them, maybe in '92 or something, I'm not really sure. Anyway, it was with Danny Goldberg, and he kind of threw out, so is there any sort of producers you guys would think about being interested in working with or whatever? And I just said Brian Eno off the cuff, and everybody sort of laughed, and I went, I'm serious about that. I think Brian Eno would be awesome. So I don't know if he ever got put in the hat for Houdini, but anyway, I think Brian Eno is still awesome. So next up is Barracks the Rockingham. This is a cool little bouncy song. I was never a huge fan of this song, and I became less a fan of the song after I had to listen to it for 14 hours in a row at the video shoot for Barracks the Rockingham, which was directed by pornographer Gregory Dark, who's no longer a pornographer. Anyway, this is something I'm going to address in a completely different video, because Gregory Dark is worth discussion just by himself, being a NYU film graduate, Stanford MFA graduate, and just a generally super interesting and highly intelligent man. So anyway, that'll be in another video, but back to the song. Buzz had the idea to have a trombone solo on it. I didn't realize trombones were on his radar, but I guess they were. And so then Dirty Walt from Fishbone got on the band's radar. So we were looking for a trombonist, and I don't think we were going to go to the Union like we did looking for a whistler. Anyway, Dirty Walt got in touch, and we went over to Fishbone's practice place, and he played some trombone in front of us, and Buzz said, okay, sounds pretty good. You know, come on over, it'll be great. So he came over to the studio, threw down maybe 2 or 3 trombone solos. I don't think it was comped in the end. I think he played it live. And the trombone solo goes through the famous meatball box, and it fits in the tune properly, and he's playing the main riff in the beginning, I think. And it made me like the song more once I heard the trombone on it. I played bass on this, and once again the bass is going through the meatball, and those big rubbery sounds that you hear are the meatball box making those noises. Weird little turntable scratchy noises and things like that. Very 90s-ish. So the next track is Jakob's Lab, possibly Jakub. Maybe somebody could enlighten me on that. But anyway, a little background behind this track. There was a point when it was sort of odd in a way. Buzz and I became interested in, we sort of had a mutual admiration, loathing, and kind of hobbyist attitude towards certain deviant ideologies with charismatic leaders. So this has to do specifically with Elijah Muhammad and the Nation of Islam. And so we both found ourselves kind of reading materials about this. And anyway, to cut a long story very short, Jakub was an evil scientist who lived on an island and invented something. I'll just pique your interest with that. So when I brought the song in, Buzz was like, oh, okay, I know what that is. So that was just, there was quite a few of these sort of coincidental things that happened. And Jakob's Lab was one of them. It's something I did on my 4-track at home in London. I do everything on it. It's got maxed out distorted samples of really fast stuff. And it's kind of a mashup of the song We Three Kings of Orient Are, a Christmas tune. And so that has a very vague reference to some of this other stuff. It's all really vague, all of it. But I like the tune, and so that was my contribution to the concept of having 3 things that were completely different and done on our own. So it works within the record, and it was a cool idea. I have a Patreon page, and if you guys would like to check it out, you'll see exclusive content, and it also helps me to support myself and create more content. I've got unreleased material, exclusives, and I've also got a level where I'm doing essays on this fantastic record collection here, and I'm going from A to Z, and I'm picking out a record and I'm writing about it, putting up files of it made on my very own stereo. So if you would like to see more content like this, consider supporting me at my Patreon channel. Who knows, I might even play the guitar a little bit on there. So come on over and check it out. Thank you. So the next tune is the Bloat. And this is a really cool song. I like this song a lot. The beginning almost sounds like it could be a Rolling Stones song to me. And while we were working on it, I almost thought, well, really the vocal part needs to be the beginning of the song. And then the really cool part that's the beginning of the song needs to be the chorus. So I was kind of thinking of it in opposite terms. I'm not sure if I ever voiced that, but it would be an interesting project for somebody to maybe do. So I'm playing slide guitar in the beginning of it. The tones are all really beautiful on this. This whole record was recorded at the famous Sound City studio in Van Nuys, and just legendary records were made there. Ronnie James Dio records, Rumors by Fleetwood Mac was made there, Pat Benatar records, I think maybe Nevermind was made there. A lot of really legendary stuff. So they had this incredible sounding room, incredible gear. Most of the basic tracks were done there, and then we did overdubs someplace else. So this really shows off the sound of the room. Joe did this great, very minimal miking technique on this track where he just had a couple of mics up, or maybe even a single mic, and really just put them through this incredible compression chain. And I think he had so many compressors going on some things that I said, if you ever get a recording studio of your own, you should call it Joe's House of Compression. Anyway, the Bloat is a super cool song, and it's got a lot of interesting stuff in it. There's one point where there's a guitar bridge that Buzz is playing, and it sounds exactly like Now I'm Here by Queen. And of course, we listened to a lot of Queen when we traveled around. So that's not surprising that it sank down into the subconscious and emerged into songs like this. The bass bridge that leads to the second half of the song sounds to me, and somebody sent me a question about this. I started thinking about it when I was listening to it. It actually sounds like a real backwards reverb, which is something that people like Joe Barrisi would have known about. It's kind of a arcane, old school psychedelic technique where you flip the 2-inch over, and you have to keep track of where, of course, the original track is. And you make another track of reverb off of that, you flip it back over, and then the reverb is backwards. And so that's what I think this is, because I know that he was doing those kind of tape techniques, which were awesome to see somebody doing in front of you. So that's that sound, and then the reverb is processed and sounds really good. The song has a really nice, lazy feel to it, relaxed feel. And in the end, it sounds kind of like it drifts into a Tom Waits type of thing. And listening to the track now, I seem to remember that Buzz was singing through maybe a cardboard paper towel tube. There was a lot of complicated stuff going on in all of these songs. Mainly they were tracked live, and we would go back in and maybe fix really tiny parts that were not to our liking more than anything. But these were the days before Pro Tools. If you're recording to tape, you go back, you either do the whole thing again or you fix the little part with somebody that has really fast fingers. So that contributes to the organic nature of these recordings also. There's no like cutting and pasting. It's just, you're doing it for real. And so that's why it sounds real. Next song is Tipping the Lion. Somebody actually sent me a message about the bass sound on this song also. And it's got the meatball box that I talked about in the other video. He'd specifically asked about the live thing, and I think in the last video I talked about using the little Boss bass synthesizer box, but this is the real meatball box on this, and everything on this sounds amazing. It's just recorded so nicely. And once again, that's analog 24-track recording to 2-inch tape with just masters at the controls. I really love the way this track sounds. It's got so much presence to it. I mean, it just sounds like it's right in the room if you play it out loud, and on headphones it's a totally different experience. Buzz plays some really nice guitar lines in this, kind of diminished scale stuff, and I love the panning on it. That's probably done in real time by Joe or maybe Chad or somebody, I'm not sure. And at the end there's this huge Sound City classic big room sound, and you can really hear the sound of what the room sounded like there. That's another one of Joe's famous compression chains. And at the very end of it, you hear all this crazy walkie-talkie sounds and stuff like that, and that's because where that studio was, there were all these like AM Mexican radio stations and stuff. So when you had the amp really hot and you had a bunch of distortion on it, you can hear, basically it's just like a big radio receiver. So I'm really impressed with how they managed all that noise in all the signal chains. Later on this CD that I have, there's an alternative version of Tipping the Line, and you can actually hear me yelling into my pickups on the bass because the bass is so hot, and when I stop you can hear the AM radio coming through. So signal management was pretty impressive on stuff like that. And this is a great sounding song. All the tones sound really interesting to me. They fit together really nicely, and it's super cool. Next song is Black Bach. This song is kind of exercise in a vaguely satanic and controversial nursery rhyme to me. It's got unexpected lyrics to it. I won't spoil it to anybody who has not heard it. To everybody who has, you know exactly what I'm talking about. This is so nicely recorded also. I mean, it's just, the tones are just beautiful on this. I don't even know how they made it sound like that, but they did. And it starts out kind of innocently enough, and then it goes into this really amazing lush section at the end where it just gets lusher and nicer over the course of about a minute and a half. I remember listening to that in the studio as we were putting more and more parts on it. I play some guitar through a wobulator and maybe the doppelganger also, and vocals kept getting added, and it just got to this point where it was just this, you know, sort of incredible lushness, and actually really beautiful. And I was basically thinking this just needs to go on for 5 more minutes, the end of this song, because it's so cool. At the very end, they do this thing right when it's at its biggest. When I say they, I'm talking about Joe and Garth and Chad, where the whole mix starts to phase. And it sounds to me like phasing on the master bus, to those who know what that is, but I'm not giving away any real secrets because I don't actually know what they did, but I have a sneaky suspicion that it might be real phasing. So to those of you who know what that is, that's serious work with tape, and you need to know what you're doing. One of the most famous examples of real phasing is Life in the Fast Lane by the Eagles. I think we might have got some of that magical real phasing from the team of mad scientists that were making everything sound really cool. I'll be eternally grateful for them making it sound like that. There was nothing that we wouldn't try that those guys suggested. So thank you. Song number 8 is Goggles, and this was tracked by somebody named Alex Newport, and I think he had something to do with God, Flesh, and Fudge Tunnel maybe. I'm a little vague on exactly how he came to be involved in this. I'm just not sure about it. Anyway, I think he tracked it at Sound City. It's so long ago now, I can't remember. There was some reason why Joe and Chad and Garth weren't involved in this. I can't remember. Anyway, so I ended up with a mix of this. We ended up at Paramount Sound Studio, different than the movie studio, place where they did a bunch of rap down on Santa Monica Boulevard in Los Angeles, Santa Monica and Western, I think. Yeah, somehow it ended up that I was going to do the mix of this tune. So Buzz and I ended up in a mix room at Paramount by ourselves, and we kind of had a day to get this mix done. And so we started working through the day. We worked all day long on it, and we basically got to, I don't know, the late afternoon or something, and I thought it was a pretty good mix. It was kind of a standard, interesting mix. I didn't have crazy amounts of effects processing chains going or anything like that. The initial recording was really powerful and sounded really gigantic. There's lots and lots of space in it. Anyway, we kind of got to the end of this first stage, and Buzz was like, I don't like it. You know, it's not weird enough. And I was kind of going, well, what do you see as a direction? And he was going, I don't know. I just know this isn't it. So it's basically any other direction than this, which is kind of a direction in a weird way. So I just said, okay, well, why don't we just, take a break and have some dinner or something and come back and start again. And so that's what we did. We came back, and I just kind of went about methodically deconstructing every single element of what I'd spent the afternoon building. And the weirder I made everything, and the more out of context I put everything, the more Buzz seemed to be going, okay, I think we're getting somewhere now. So that was an interesting process of just plain old deconstruction. And once I got into the sort of groove of doing that, I could deconstruct everything pretty quickly. So basically I got to the end where I was just destroying the vocal track and a variety of other things. And we got to the end of that sequence of mixing, and he was like, okay, I think we're there. And that's what's on the record. So it is a mix. I don't know what it's a mix exactly of, but I guess it's like when you take everything in your refrigerator after your electricity goes out and try to make food from it or something. The song has grown on me. It has a very distinct place in the buffet that is Stag. There is an original mix kicking around somewhere. I've tried to look for it at one point, but I don't know where it is. Maybe somebody who was involved in the assembly of the album has the original mix. And when we played it live, it was closer to what happened initially in the studio. So anybody that has a live recording of it, that's closer to where it was originally. And the reason I know about food spoilage in a refrigerator when the electricity goes out is because that seems to happen in Austin twice a year.